Hello. So you have watched the introductory video where I kind of gave you a detail of what needs to be done. So you're on the first step, and this is the 2020 annual preceptor update that needs to be completed. If you're here doing this, you probably didn't make the in-person meeting, and this is just as acceptable. So without further ado, let's get started. So the purpose of this is to identify the new additions to the precepting program that we have here at Princeton Rescue Squad. And primarily we're looking at the new website that is specifically for our preceptors. We're going to talk about the updated preceptor manual and what those new features are. We're going to look at the new programs in the future, and we're going to talk about the updated preceptor affiliation agreement that you'll have to complete and email back to me. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Now I noticed that it looks like my picture is covering up the website. But remember, you can always go to princetonrescue-edu.com, and if you go under the Students and Faculty tab at the top on that website, you'll actually find the precepting faculty link there, and you can click on it. It'll take you right to the website that's brought up here in the slide presentation. So items that you have to complete in order to remain current include watching this video, of course, and answering the questions at the end of the video. And you will also have to submit an updated agreement. So I'm trying to make this as streamlined and as least stressful as possible. So that updated agreement that you have to submit, it's actually written in a PDF file where you can actually fill in the blanks online. You can do that on your phone or on your computer. Type in all the information and then just save that and email it to me. That's all you've got to do, and that will keep you up to date and current. But just remember, I have to have the completion of this video with the questions and the updated agreement in order to change you on the website from expired to current. So let's talk about the new elements that are in the preceptor manual. And the first thing we're going to look at is the training guidelines, and it has been specifically streamlined by course type. Previously, we didn't have it set up this way. Now we do. So if you actually look at the table of contents, you will see that it's split into the EMT, paramedic, and CCT training guidelines. So if you're ever curious about what the students can and cannot do, or some suggestions of what they can and cannot do in the precepting field, or in the clinical internship or hospital internship, or in the capstone, this is where you can go to find that. Now you'll see in that table of contents that I've also highlighted under the paramedic training guidelines, which is the most extensive. We have one that's highlighted called the field internship, and it's capitalized as capstone. This is page 7. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You need to remember this. This gives you strict details and guidelines on what the students are allowed to do in capstone and how they are defined as being successful in their attempts. So it's very important that you take a few minutes and review this page. Also, I want to let you know now, if you've not already noticed, not only do you have the PDF for the preceptor manual on the page on the website that you're viewing right now, but you also have another tab on the website that gives you all of the preceptor resources. And on that tab or on that page, you will find a PDF format of the orientation manual. So if you ever need to go back and look at it, you always have it at your fingertips. So when we look at the clinical training guidelines, this is just kind of a reminder. This is not changed from what was in there previously. I just want to highlight it and remind you that only the skills that have been signed off by the instructor can be performed in the clinical setting. So if you ever have any concerns or you want to confirm what the student can and cannot do, please review that student's documentation to verify what they've been approved to do in the field. They are supposed to carry that with them at all times. If they do not have that documentation, you have the right to turn that student away, send them home, because they came to the clinical unprepared. Now, I do want to make a special note about the paramedic capstone. This is really important. Again, that paramedic capstone is listed on page 7 of the orientation manual. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You need to remember that page number for later, page 7. I want to read to you the definition of a successful team lead from page 7. So if you will give me 1 second, I'm going to pull that up. So I'm actually going to pause the video for a minute. Okay, I am back. Again, I just want to mention that, of course, we are looking at adding the paramedic course. It's not an if, it's a when. So if you are a paramedic or a CCT paramedic, you are probably going to have a paramedic student at some point in your time. I also want to mention, even if you're an EMT preceptor, it doesn't mean you should fast forward, because the questions at the end are not specific to whether you're an EMT preceptor, a paramedic, or a CCT refresher. You need to know the whole book. So all the information I'm giving you need to remember. I really want to stress the importance for my paramedic preceptors that you read and understand the definition of a successful team lead that is found on page 7 of the orientation manual. Now let me read this to you very quickly. The student has successfully led the team if he or she has conducted a comprehensive assessment, not necessarily performed the entire interview or physical exam, but rather been in charge of the patient. But rather have been in charge of the assessment, as well as formulated and implemented a treatment plan for the patient. This means that most, if not all, of the decisions have been made by the student, especially formulating a field impression, directing the treatment, determining patient acuity, disposition, and packaging, or moving the patient, if applicable. Minimal to no prompting was needed by the preceptor. No action was initiated or performed that endangered the physical or psychological safety of the patient, bystanders, other crews, or responders. The preceptor should not agree to a successful rating unless it is truly deserved. As a general rule, more unsuccessful attempts indicate a willingness to try and are better than no attempt at all. To be counted as a team lead, the paramedic student must conduct that comprehensive assessment, establish a field impression, determine that patient acuity, formulate a treatment plan, direct that treatment, and direct and participate in the transport of the patient to a medical facility. Transfer of care to higher level of medical authority, that means they also need to be responsible for giving the patient care report not only to regional command, but they need to also provide that at the receiving facility. Let me back up. I'm sorry, I have to back up here. Transfer of care to higher medical authority or termination of care in the field. For the capstone, and this is we have the course listing as NRPM for Nationally Registered Paramedic 204 course. It's called the Capstone Paramedic Field Practicum. To meet the breadth of the paramedic profession, team leads must include transport to a medical facility and may occasionally include calls involving transfer of care to an equal level or higher level of medical authority, termination of care in the field, or patient refusal of care. Now, that is the definition of the successful team lead, and I want to point out there are some special notations that I've included on this slide. Now, in order for the student to graduate a paramedic program, they have to complete a minimum of 20 successful team leads. 20 successful team leads. So it may very well be that if they're unsuccessful for the first 10, it may be that that student has attended to 30 patients in total. But successful team leads, you have to have a minimum number of 20. Of those 20, 18 must be ALS transports. Now these patients can be transported to the emergency room, or it could be listed as an ALS. I want to make that very clear. ALS, interfacility transfer to higher care facility, or a facility that offers certain special treatment that the other facility, the transferring facility, didn't have. No more than 2 in that 20 can be BLS, a patient refusal, or termination in the field. So just remember, these students must document a full assessment of all body systems in order for that BLS, patient refusal, or termination in the field to count. So again, they have to have a minimum of 20 successful team leads. 18 of those need to be an ALS transport. They can have 2, but no more than 2 counted, and that can come from a BLS, a patient refusal, or termination in the field. And again, for those BLS, patient refusal, or termination of the field to count, that student must provide a full document on the patient assessment of all body systems. Now, the new information that's been included in the documentation of internship worksheets, we want to kind of make sure that we keep people from being confused from the upfront and know exactly what's expected of you. So we're going to move forward here. With the EMT student documentation, we have included the actual worksheets with notes attached to them. So you'll see them in the Preceptor manual as you see on this page, and you'll see the little bubbles out from it. So again, this gives you guidance and explains what you're responsible for. Now the student is going to fill out that top part. Let me see if I can get here we go. The student is going to fill this part out. What you're responsible for is to confirm that the dates and times that are being reported are accurate. And you're going to follow these directions. Here's the directions for filling out the rest of the form. You're going to provide how many points that student has received. And remember, EMT students have, the one thing about the EMT students is a little different than the paramedic students, and even in some cases the CCT students, is that when they are released to internship, they have completed every component of the clinical of the skill requirements before they ever come to you. With the paramedic students, it's of course building and a progression of learning. So not all skills are learned as they come out. So you need to be very careful with them and know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do as they progress. Same thing with CCT students. We try to send them out after they've completed the specific modules. So, you know, we expect them to go to the pediatric unit after we've already covered the modules on the pediatric assessment, and we won't schedule them for a pediatric rotation in the hospital if they've not completed that pediatric module in the class. So you can be assured of that. But our EMT students have completed all skills prior to release into the internship environment. So you can rest assured of that, but they will have their skill sheets with their sign-off available for you to view. Any insights that you can provide down here are really welcome. We do read these. I keep an entire document where we track every patient encounter, and it's kept permanently. It's a permanent record. And I actually transcribe all of your points that you award and any little pieces and points that you put in here for feedback. That stuff gets documented as well. So we have that running report that we keep on those students. So this is page 2. This is the back side of the document. And I want to point out something to you that has been a point of confusion. You will see here under leadership, development, and progression, they show a potential and development beyond the course. The student makes effort to participate without direction. Student shows an understanding of the job and the duties associated toward the level of an EMT. And it talks about leadership, development, and progression. A lot of people thought, well, this means that they're being a team leader. We don't expect those EMT students come out and start into the internship as a team leader. We want to see that they have developed and progressed over time, and that they are showing that they're able to function. So the more detail you can provide us here on how well they're developing, or that progression of development, if you've seen that patient, or excuse me, that student in the past, you know, the more detail you can provide us on how they're doing really helps us out in the long run. And of course, you want to sign at the end of this. Now, please remember the one thing that has not changed. These students are supposed to be handing that documentation over to you to sign. You are supposed to put it in an envelope and sign and seal that envelope and give it back to the student. That way we know that the documentation hasn't been altered after you've seen them. Now we want to talk about the paramedic and the CCT clinical documentation. Now we did marry the internship form. So what you see in front of you is a document that has been provided from the National Registry of EMTs. It's specific for paramedic students, but we've adopted this for use in our CCT courses as well. So in this case, we're talking about the clinical internship. We're talking about hospital rotations for the paramedic and the CCT student. When you're looking at these forms, and also I want you to know that this is very similar in layout and expectations for the field, but there's a couple key points and elements we'll talk about. So this kind of goes for both, okay? Remember that you're looking here to verify that the information is accurate. So that's what you're looking for. You're just double checking it. Make sure that the student, is responsible for filling this form out. They shouldn't be handing this to you with it blank and expecting you to do anything. This is their responsibility. They should also be documenting each patient contact. And you as the preceptor have to rate that student. So if you look here, you've got S for student. They're gonna rate this on how they feel they did, and then you as the preceptor are going to go behind them and give them your professional evaluation of how they performed on that particular patient encounter. Now, if you're a hospital nurse and you're looking at this internship and you're like, I don't have time to do all this, be very careful. Just look through it. Give us the best feedback information you can on this. We realize that your time is very tight and you're giving of yourself in order to have these students done. When you're evaluating them, you can either list it as not applicable because they did not perform the skill or it wasn't expected to be done. A 0 means that they were unsuccessful, they required excessive or critical prompting, they not attempted when they should have. 1 means that they were marginal, meaning they were, they did okay, but they're not what I would consider competent yet. Maybe it wasn't excessive or critical prompting, but you still had to kind of give them a little bit of prompts here and there, and you're like, yeah, they're kind of close, but they're not quite there yet. And then a 2 means that they were successful, and you consider them to be entry-level competent on that assessment or whatever that clinical objective was. So this is page 2, and we want you to provide anything noted on page 1 where there was either listed as marginal or unsuccessful. We want you to give us some ideas on what went wrong. This also helps the student out as well. And we want you to make sure that you fill in each of these boxes. So tick them off as they go. Of course, if they didn't deserve or earn that point, don't click it. Be very cognizant of what you're approving, because again, we do document this. This is part of their record, and this is what we look at. Please sign attesting to your ratings above. And then there is a special point that actually is right here, and I blew it up so you could see it right below here. It says, I agree to the above ratings, preceptor signature. Again, that's right there. And then below, you also have to initial. Now, this does not apply to paramedics in the field. This applies to our hospital internship rotations. Okay, so whether it's paramedic or CCT, this initialing applies to you. So when you initial here, you're stating that you have had access to the preceptor orientation manual, that you've looked at what the responsibilities are for the student, you've looked at what the training guidelines are for your unit or your ward, and that you understand we have to maintain that student's privacy just as much as we do HIPAA but it's called FERPA. So we have to protect their educational privacy. So please initial this form. Again, just as before, we want these forms to be taken, put in an envelope, sealed and signed by you, given back to the students so they can bring it in for me to review. So one final note about this hospital internship. If you have any questions at all, or you can't remember exactly what is expected of the student, at the bottom of page 2, you will find the clinical objectives and a little bit of an explanation for each of those topics. So this should help you kind of work through that. And as always, if you run into any type of issues, my phone number is listed at the bottom, and you can always leave me a voicemail. So when it comes to the field documentation, the field internship for paramedic is the capstone. We don't have any opportunities where they are just team members on paramedic. They go straight into capstone. So they should be starting to function as team leaders when they get to this point. Please note that all students from the paramedic program at Princeton have completed all requirements prior to the field internship. This is key for you. When they get to you for the capstone, they are done. So this session is considered capstone event of the program. All students have been validated on all skills, patient assessments, the formulation and treatment plans for disease pathology, and every single one of these students have already completed ACLS, PHTLS, GIMS, PALS, and PEP. They've received their certification cards for them. It is your responsibility as a preceptor to provide the individual with team leadership opportunities and evaluate them in that manner. And we talked about the definition of what's considered a successful team leadership. So please refer back to page 7 of the manual. Your role here is extremely crucial to the paramedic students. CCT students, we do use this form for them as well. When you're dealing with a CCT student, you're going to deal with them just as you would in the hospital internship evaluation mode like we just discussed. Again, all of that documentation, as a preceptor, you have to rate each patient encounter that the student had. Your ratings are listed. They're right up here in this little box. If you're ever questioning or concerned, it's always right there. And then page 2 looks very much the same thing. The only difference you're going to see is because you're not in the hospital, you're not one of those nurses, you don't have the little part underneath that says that you're going to initial it, okay? It's going to go straight to the box where it gives you those definitions. Now, with our CCT students, they have one additional checklist that has to be filled out. This is a skill checklist that goes with them on each rotation. And during that rotation, you will be filling this form out and signing it. So you're going to tell me, you'll put, the student should pre-populate this with your name here. And you want to tell me what date these were observed and performed. And you're going to initial it. And so that should kind of lay out there to where we can kind of track those skills and what they did and did not do that day. We don't expect the CCT student to be able to do all of these skills in the field. They will get the experience in the simulation lab as well, but we do want to try to track what they were able to accomplish in the field if at all possible. And of course, make sure you sign at the end of the rotation. Now, the changes to the articulation agreement are very simple. They were just kind of notes that I wanted to make. So let me flip. And it really comes down to page 2 of the Preceptor Articulation Agreement. And it goes to where I included the information for you on the website so that you understand that you can review the program status at any time. You can look at pertinent documents. You have a resources page with all of that. And all you have to do is log into princetonrescue.com-edu.com and click on the Precepting Faculty tab, and that will take you directly to your personal website where you have all of the information available to you. The other thing I'm going to start doing is you may receive emails from me that provides updated information regarding internships or lets you know where those students are in the program or if there's something that you need to be aware of that's specific for that course. And that Princeton Rescue Squad does agree not to use your personal data for any activities outside of what's necessary for internship. So we're just collecting your data, maintaining it, and contacting you only when we have to, and that you understand as a preceptor you can terminate the contract at any time. That's the same that's always been. So if you have any questions on this document, please feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So what are your next steps? One, you've watched the video, boom, we're done. Now you have to answer the test questions. There's 10 test questions. Once you're done with it, you're done. It'll automatically save that. It'll send me a note, let me know that you finished, you're good to go. The other thing you'll have to do, click the link on the website for the updated articulation agreement. It's going to pop up in that PDF format. Remember, it comes in that PDF where you will be able to fill in the blanks, and then you're going to fill it out and email it to me. And once you've done that, you're done. So I appreciate you. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you. The student success really is dependent upon you, and I couldn't do this program without you. Our instructors can teach them all the stuff in the world in the classroom setting, but if you're not there to back it up and make sure that they actually can function in the field, we don't know that they're entry-level competent. So you are a very important member of this team, and we value everything that you put into it and all your time. One other note that I want to make is that, yes, specifically with our EMT students, if you're precepting an EMT student and you're going to ride the call-in because your ALS partner is in the back, you can either have the choice, if the ALS partner is a preceptor, that student can ride in the back with them and get that experience, or you can have that student right up front and see what it is to work the radio, to work those sirens or whatever it may be, because that's important information that they need to understand anyway. So we want them to be field ready. We want them to be comfortable with picking up the radio and being able to respond back. So if you want to give them those opportunities, you can. So they can ride up front with you if you have an ALS partner, or like I said, if that ALS partner is also a preceptor, they can ride in the back with the preceptor and get that experience of what it's like to be on an ALS call. So again, thank you so much. I couldn't do this without each and every single one of you, and I want you to know that. I really appreciate all your effort. Thank you, and here's your questions.